now that we have the first part of our accepting suffering video series, part one is done. Now we're doing part two because it's really easy for me to talk about suffering in theory, but if I were to like put it into practice, like what it actually looks like, it looks a lot different, and it's also a lot more challenging to accept when you're going through it. Okay, one of those things right now that I'm going through is right now I am working a sales position. I'm not gonna say where, but right now I am working a sales position. It's very uncomfortable for me to to um, to be there. Right, I'm used to working manual labor jobs, the jobs that no one wants to do. I'm used to working um, warehouse jobs, landscaping some stuff. Right, as a result, there are some aspects of myself that don't perform as well as I want to in the type of corporate environments that I may or may not be in, right? Um, like recently, I went out canvassing, and basically I went to door for businesses to try to help them sell the service that we were selling, right? Um, but that was very uncomfortable for me to do, and something that's always been a highlight in my life when it comes to my own personal suffering is my ability to talk to strangers. I have a very hard time talking to strangers who I don't know, especially in an unfamiliar environment, right? um, but essentially the whole point is that you're going to have moments in time in your life where um, whether it's big or small, the amount of suffering you go through may be necessary in order to build who you need to become. And ultimately, there are going to be certain situations, kind of like we are going over in the last video, that's going to be out of your control, like this one, right? Because I have to write emails, I have to follow up with people, I have to interrupt people's day in order to, maybe help them out with some tech stuff, right? But ultimately, that's a form of suffering that's really outside of my control because it's a part of my job. It's a part of my job. It's a part of the job description that I was hired for. And, I might be unfamiliar with it right now, but later on, things may change. Something I especially noticed is that, at least in the beginning when I first started out, I was really questioning why do I feel so uncomfortable here, right? Why am I harder on myself here in this situation than I am in others? And and part of that is because I'm a beginner again. Kind of going back to, I think a couple of years ago, I was making a video about starting over at the gym, or actually it's in our self starter series, where essentially, I think when you start something new, it may feel uncomfortable, but that's where the growth happens essentially. Being new at something, learning something new, can be one of the most like emotionally embarrassing moments in your journey of becoming better, because frankly, every time you mess up, you might get in your head talking about, oh, it makes me look bad. And even though everyone knows you're new, like, you really want to do very well for your position. If you could be a genius in your new position, I think you would choose that, right? But you don't get to choose that. Now, ultimately, what I'm getting at here is that the oh my gosh, I hate these raps right now. I gotta focus on doing this crap. But the whole point, when you're starting something new, right? At least in my personal life, hopefully you may be able to relate, or else it doesn't really matter. Is that growing is one of the most necessary parts of life, but it's not the most enjoyable. Okay. One of the reasons why I felt emotionally like I was suffering and I was behind, especially in this sales position, is because, one, I wanted to do well, but also, like I mentioned this several times, I don't like being a newbie at something. I don't like having to learn it. I'd rather just pick it up and just know it very well. And that's not the case, especially in this situation, right? Every time I do a cold call and I get a no, or every time I get a cold call and the person's really receptive and I don't try to take advantage of that opportunity, it's like, dang, bro, why didn't I think of that? Why did I say this, or why did I say that? Like, every rejection is a demonstration that I'm not, one, where I want to be, or when I'm feeling or thinking more negatively, that I don't belong, because I needed to I need to learn more stuff and do more things, right? And that's basically what growth is really all about. You know, my boss tells me all the time that I picked you for a reason, and I don't, I don't plan on going back on it. So even though it's a temporary position, I'm still like, okay, I can still make this work. Okay, growth is supposed to be humbling. Okay, growth is supposed to make you feel vulnerable. Growth is supposed to do all that stuff. And I'm mainly reiterating that just because we're reaching to the next part of our series, and I'm getting to it, guys. I promise. Even when I'm in the gym, right? Especially when I get back into it, I notice that a lot of self-doubt may or may not creep in sometimes. And it kind of has the same thought pattern as when I am, oh crap, let me just hook this up. The same thought pattern as I am thinking about when I'm starting something new, or even a development of that, actually. The weight does not care how I feel that day. The weight does not care what I think about myself. My weight doesn't care what my ultimate mission is. It doesn't care about how bad my day went. It's always going to be the same. And the thing is when I'm focused on weightlifting, I try to look at my thoughts when I am when I'm lifting, you know, especially when the weight's heavy for me. I'm thinking to myself, what I might fail. I'm thinking to myself, what if I can't pick it up? What if I accidentally, you know, self-delete myself because I did more than I thought I could carry? What if my form's off? What if I injure myself? What if? Ooh, that was actually kind of clean. Anyway, ultimately, all those thoughts come from the accumulation of me getting better, even when I don't feel like I am. Because if I, oh, that was terrible. See, my feet are like crooked, but when I do that. And it's the same thing with the gym, right? When I come here and I hit a squat that's really heavy for me, or I hit a bench that's really heavy for me, I start looking at the weight and I start going in my head, you know, what if I fail? You know, what if I accidentally self-delete because I thought I did more than I could carry? What if I get injured in my wrist because my form is wrong and I don't realize it until later? You know, what if this weight is something that I can't accomplish? You know, even though I've demonstrated to pick that weight up before, those thoughts are are there. Because ultimately, as real as those thoughts are, so is the decision to go through with the weightlifting, to go through with whatever I was feeling at the time, and so decide to do the opposite of what I was thinking, or the opposite of the thought pattern I was thinking in the first place, because the decision to do the opposite is just as important as the thoughts and feelings that I have, sometimes even more so. You have to stop trusting your emotions and start trusting your preparation. Particular case, in a lot of cases in my life, and especially in sparring or when it comes to smokers or whatnot, I lose more battles. Hold on 1 second. I lose more battles before they even begin because I already lose in my head. Okay, that's a combo I gotta work on, but we'll see. In my own imagination, I already failed. In my own imagination, I'm already suffering. In my own imagination, I am not able to pick up the weight. Even if I have in the past, even if I have done it for 6 reps, I cannot imagine me doing it for 8 reps because either I haven't done it before or I'm very unsure about my abilities, right? And the thing is, what I've considered is that sometimes I may not even pick up the weight. I may not pick up the suffering because I've already suffered enough in my head. because I listened to my emotions instead of focusing on my goal and where I wanted to go. And ultimately, in that specific scenario, sometimes the suffering wasn't the weight itself. Sometimes the suffering is not hitting the bag. Sometimes the suffering is not the sparring session. It's ultimately the suffering that you inflict upon yourself by meditating on the negative thoughts that are in your head, which affects what you may not do, right? But think about it like this, right? A good father is going to discipline his kids, not because like he likes punishing them, but because but because he's an adult in the making. You know, there's certain character stuff that a child should know before they enter into the adult world. You know, maybe some integrity, maybe some patience, maybe some love, maybe some care, maybe some discernment. But regardless of the character trait it's a responsibility of the parents, in this particular case, the father, to learn about, not to learn about, but to teach their child the best way to operate in the world, but without making it look like a punishment. You know, kind of going back to that idea before about how suffering is like almost like a refiner, right? And even in Hebrews 12, it talks about how discipline is not pleasant at the time, but it's more so for you becoming more complete as a human being, more complete as, like more than likely, you have learned more from your losses, more when things have gone wrong, more from things that that you messed up in rather than the things that you won from. Like it's a great achievement that you did it, but you made mistakes along the way that you can remember, and you can even teach somebody else to avoid them if you need to, just to have them avoid that sense of suffering, to make them better, to make you better. During that time when you are being disciplined either by your own suffering, which I do think is from God, but ultimately, no one likes feeling uncomfortable. No one likes failing. No one likes the transitionary phases of life. I've yet to meet someone who legitimately loves and chases after my life sucks right now. Okay, that entire model. A part I haven't really talked about is in Hebrews 12. I think immediately after that is so that the suffering may produce like the fruit of righteousness or something like that. I'm gonna put the scripture up on screen. But the whole point about it is that the pain has a purpose, right? I keep talking about it over and over again in every point, hoping I can drive it home. But it has a purpose. How many times have you asked for something, prayed for something, wished for something, but the work it actually takes to get it is very difficult to do, very difficult to maintain, very difficult to maintain, very difficult to maintain. And you either decide not to do it in general or stop it altogether. There are times where I pray for patience and someone brings me someone that irritates me. There have been times I prayed for wisdom, but I hated reading. How many times have I prayed for greatness, asked for greatness, wished for greatness, and have hated going through what it takes to become great? You know, how many times have I considered a comic book idea that I had, except the whole idea of drawing it out and actually writing the dialogue and doing the whole story or whatnot? How many times has that been dreadful to me? The point I'm getting at is that what if hardship was the answer and not a punishment for what I wanted? We're going to take these gloves off and actually start lifting. I think either 1st or 2nd Peter, I forget. I'm going to put the scripture on screen. Is that don't be surprised when you are met with trials of many kinds. You know, at least especially when it comes to the spiritual walk. Not even spiritual walk, but just in life. Like, just do not be surprised when that stuff happens, because that's a part of not only your Christian life, but also, these guys are sparring in the back. Instead of going to yourself, why am I going through all this suffering? Why does my life suck? Consider this. What if the suffering is here to try to produce something better in you? And you need to go through the suffering in order to get there in the first place, right? It's just that mind shift that we've been talking about this entire first and second part of how suffering is just a part of life and how you need to accept it. But suffering is indeed essential when it comes to human existence, when it comes to becoming a better person. Don't know why that is. It kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Since this is a semi-spiritual conversation, I do want to express the fact that there are certain things that I read in the Bible that I struggle with. There are certain things that I struggle with spiritually. And I have to wrestle with those things. There are some things where I go like, why does God want me to live like this? Why the heck can I do whatever I want to and still get into heaven? Why can't that happen? And that's what I think about. That's what I think about on a regular basis, and that's something I wrestle with. You know, and it's very difficult for me, especially when it comes to specific topics that I'm not really going to discuss in this video, but that I question it. I question why does it have to be the case, and sometimes I don't get an answer, and that's something I struggle with all the time. I hate it. I really don't like it a lot. Hate is a little bit more. I dislike it, but yeah. Every day that I wake up and I open the Bible, right, I get to have a choice of whether or not I try to fit the words around what I want it to say, or I'm changed by it. Now, obviously, I'm not perfect, which is why I try to, preface. Well, I don't really try to do this often. I'm gonna make a better effort to do this more often. But making a point to let you guys know I don't know everything and do your own research. Be like the Bereans, look that up. But similarly, sometimes things in the Bible cause me to suffer a lot because it's about the refinement of my character. Kind of like we were talking about in the last video on the Art of Growth series about how we're supposed to be refining silver, right? You're supposed to burn the impurities away. And through the suffering, you do that. If you're given a position of power, how you use that power is a great demonstration of who you are, especially when you're given that type of position. You know, if you are given great wealth, whatever you do with it is a demonstration of character. What you ever do with your current wealth is a great demonstration of what you do if you got more of it. You know, it's the accumulation, the compounding of your character, the compounding of your life, burning away the impurities that are within you. You know, just like when you wake up every day and you want to become better, you want to grow. You're gonna pick an uncomfortable life at first. You're gonna pick an uncomfortable, a vulnerable state of being that you picked up by choice because you wanted to be better, fortunately and unfortunately for you, right? But through that process of becoming better, you burn away on all the things that cannot come with you as you grow and become better. So sometimes growth happens not necessarily because God hates you, but because He is putting stuff in your way that's going to burn away all the stuff that's not necessary for the thing that He's preparing you for. Something I want to express as well is that all suffering is not inherently good either, okay? Some suffering is from us making really stupid decisions, okay? Are you broke 40 years from now? You probably made some poor financial decisions in the past. Weren't raised with the best family home ever, and you're 32 years old, 25 years old, and you're out of that situation. Now it's up to you what you want to do with it. Sometimes suffering can make us bitter. Sometimes suffering from things outside of our control can make us angry at life, and just because of that anger, it comes out in a plenty of different ways. You may become raw in your speech. You may become cynical about life. And all those things can benefit you. But what I want you guys to focus on is what is the suffering producing in you? What decisions are you making through the suffering, after the suffering, as a result of said suffering? Suffering make you become bitter or make you become better? And that's a very important distinction. Suffering is one of the greatest gifts that God has given us. Not because pain feels good at the time, but because it can produce growth. Patience, wisdom, discernment, learning from our mistakes. That suffering can help us evolve past our current selves, help us grow past our current selves, and become better. Uh, I feel like I'm saying the same point over and over again in a different way, but if the theme is not evident, then either you're slow, or I need to do a better job at explaining stuff, or maybe a little bit of both. Now think about your own life. Think about a time where you learned the most. Think about a time when you suffered the most, and think about who you would be if none of that stuff happened in the first place. Would you have learned gratitude if it didn't happen? Would you have learned how to vet effectively if that girl didn't play you like that? Would you have learned not to lie on your job application if you got caught in in that situation? Like who would you be without suffering? Would you have looked for God? Would you have learned patience? Would you have learned the value of honesty? And this can be at any point in life, not even just in your adult life, just high school, middle school, wherever. Just think about those moments where you suffered and you learned something and you became better from it. And now think about the good things that you went through and think about how much you learned from there. I, Usually when I talk to people, they have made a lot more mistakes, that they have lost a lot more than they've won, and because of that, they're able to teach other people about it. Because of that, they're willing to encourage other people in similar positions. Because of the suffering that they did, and the desire for other people not to go through it, they give it to another person who's green, who's new, so they don't have to suffer the same way. And because of that situation, because the new person doesn't suffer from the same thing that the older person suffered through, they can now find new avenues because that obstacle has already been removed and has been burned away for the refinement of that person's skill, network, or just work life in general, or just life in general. But that's essentially the point of this part. I'm at these legs. There are plenty of times where I wanted out and I didn't want to continue on and do what I needed to do, but because I did push past, because I did continue on, I changed and I learned, and that's part of the reason why you guys are even getting this video series in the first place. Is because I want to impart that experience and that perspective onto you. And if you pick it up, I personally think that you learn a lot. And if you just implement some of the stuff I said, even if it's just in mindset, then you can get a lot further than you were before. Ultimately, what I'm essentially trying to communicate as of right now is that if you're going to a time where you're suffering through hardship, if you're suffering through trials and tribulations, um, don't waste it. I'm not saying enjoy it. I'm just saying don't waste it. You may be missing out on an important growth opportunity because you're so focused on your pain currently. If Malachi was right, then the fire isn't really here to harm you. It's here to burn away everything that isn't silver, right? If Hebrews is right, if Hebrews is right, that means God hasn't abandoned you and caused all your suffering. That means that he's treating you like his child in order to help you grow. If Peter was correct, then you should not be surprised when suffering comes upon you, because it's for your own growth, it's for your own good. All that being said, to my viewers who are watching this, my challenge to you is that if you're going through suffering right now, if you're going through something right now that hurts you, okay, consider this question: who am I going to become due to this suffering? We've been saying this every single clip, every single cut, every single time, and I really want to drive this point home. And it gets irritating, and I'm sure it is for you as a viewer. Why do you keep saying the same thing over and over again in a different way? But the whole point here is that by answering that question, by answering that question and deciding to grow and suffer through it smartly, you'll get more out of that than escaping the problem ever would have done, with some exceptions, right? Sometimes the thing you're asking for requires a certain level of grit, a certain level of discipline, a certain level of optimism that you may not have yet. But through the suffering that you do in order to get to your goal, you learn a lot from it. You know, when you learn a new skill in IT, or you learn a new skill in boxing or anything like that, sometimes you're going to be afraid. But once you become so good at it, it almost becomes second nature to you, and now you're asking your past self, why was I even afraid at that time? Forgetting what you were experiencing at that time period because of the trials that you had in order to refine yourself. Okay. Anyway, I really hope this video makes sense. This is probably not one of my best videos that I put out for a hot minute. This was a terrible workout session. It was just all bad. Okay. But that's what being a small YouTuber is about. You know, making mistakes while I can, experimenting while I can. And if I blow up one of these days, shoot, I can always just redo the series. Free content, right? Anyway, uh see you next time. Right, if y'all enjoy the video, like, subscribe, share with a friend. Triumph Athletic, code MINT, MINT, for just if you just like the clothes that I wore today, 10% off your order, mint, MINT. But I'm gonna see you guys in the next one.